Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's LIV Adelaide event. With the Team Wacky event going on over there for PGA, I think a lot more people are going to be watching LIV this week, so I wanted to make sure you guys had all the info that you need to go out there, make some DFS lineups, go out there, place some outright bets for the LIV side, because I was able to acquire some shots gained metrics over there from that side, so we could finally dive into the stats, do a full breakdown of what to expect over there, and we're not flying out there in the dark anymore. So gonna go through the golf course, what to expect from the Grange Golf Club, where they're going to be playing this week, and then afterwards going through the betting and the DFS side and going over some of my top targets over there for both formats. So a lot to talk about here. Let's start it off with a look at the golf course in this event and what to expect from LIV Adelaide. You are going to see a ton of scoring around this golf course. The Grange is relatively short. It's also a par 72 with plenty of par 5s and a few drivable par 4s. So you could see some players go out there and making 8-9 birdies. Now you're not going to see a 59, a 58 like Bryson, because it is a par 72 setup, but there's a ton of scoring to be had out there. And while there are a lot of low numbers that you can make, it is a tight golf course. It does have quite a bit of overhanging trees, which can cause some issues. So it's not like you can completely spray it over this golf course. It's a little bit more positional than it is a power sort of track, but if you keep it in play, if you have those irons dialed, you can go out there and make an absolute shit ton of birdies. For evidence of that, look at Taylor Gooch, who shot -10 the first 2 days en route to an absolutely huge margin of victory. It got a little bit close there on Sunday last year, but the guy was -20 after rounds 1 and 2. So it's that kind of golf course. You can see over here on the left, we have the scorecard for this golf course. It's less than 7,000 yards, right? It's 6,900 yards, and it's that par 72. So the real good stretch of golf, you can see holes 9, 10, and 11 are all very scoreable. You have the drivable 8th, which will be moved up for one of the 3 rounds. Hole number 4 can be drivable as well. That can also be moved up to be closer to 300 yards. And even 18, right? That is 377, played drivable for one of the 3 days last year. So there's a lot of birdie opportunities to be had, and outside of the driving corridors, which can be a little bit tight, this is a pretty easy golf course. The pin locations all kind of have a bull effect to them, and something that we noticed last year is that there were more hole outs at this LIV event than any of the other PGA Tour events last year. And you got to consider that this is only a 3-day event. They also only have 54 players out there in the field. There were more hole outs at the Grange last year than any other event in professional golf. So there's clearly something going on with this course, right? A lot of eagles that were being made, and I think a lot of it comes down to the pin locations. You have a lot of those feeder spots where if you use the slopes to either direction of that pin, you can get really close and have some of those tap-ins, or even a few of those shots go in. So if we take a look at the scoring average last year, it was really easy for rounds 2 and 3. Day 1, it played 1.86 under par, which is still a respectable score rate, a lot lower than a lot of other courses out there. But round 2 played 3.7 under par, and that's for the entire field, which is crazy stuff. And then Sunday played a whole 3 shots under. So this golf course is not one of the stiffer tests that you're going to see over there on the LIV side. And really, I think any sort of player can succeed here. Because it's only 6,900 yards, you don't have to be a bomber to succeed. Being a bomber will help you out on the drivable par 4s, those par 5s. In fact, hole number 7 is only a 500-yard par 5. You had players last year hitting pitching wedge for their second shot into the par 5. So power can be helpful on those holes. I mean, you're going to be able to overpower them. But you had guys last year like Kevin Na find success. So we take a look at the leaderboard, right? Arnaud Lahiri finished in second. Patrick Reed, Cam Smith, all amongst some of the worst drivers out there in the LIV Tour, found success. And even Taylor Gooch, right? He's not a slouch off the tee. He's certainly not long. He's not really one of the more accurate drivers either, but he's an elite tier iron player. You could say the same thing about Arnaud, right? Patrick Reed, more of a short game guy, right? Cam Smith, more of a, I'd say from fairway in, right? Irons around the green and putting are all huge positive for him. Even Pat Perez, right? We don't see a lot of the bombers up here. So Peter Uihlein hits it a long way. Same thing with Dean Burmester, guys like, DJ, Kokrak, Watson, right? All down there towards the top 10. But your top 5, right? Even Cameron Tringale, right? Down here in 5th place. None of these players are known for hitting it a long way. So that's the main thing we noticed from 2023. This is the only sample size that we have at this golf course in terms of professional golf. And I think if anything, you really want to look from fairway in, right? The guys that are excellent with their irons around the green and the putter are the ones that are going to see the biggest advantage in my modeling. So we're going to hop into the shots gained metrics here in a second. But this golf course, I would say don't overreact too much to 2023. But last year's event is the only thing we have to work off of. And based off of that, it does look like a little bit of a shorter hitter sort of paradise. And it does look like we're going to see a lot of low scores here in 2024. And now that we've got an idea of what to expect from LIV Adelaide, let's take a look at the shots gained metrics. So these were collected before the LIV Miami event. LIV published a set of their shots gained metrics through one of their analytic partners, but they haven't posted them since then. So it is missing the last 3 rounds over there for LIV Miami. But this is about the best as you're going to find around the industry. So they've got shots gained metrics just like we would out there for PGA Tour event. I've back tested them. I've gone through it. All of them add up to 0. So they're doing something right when it comes to putting them together. And there were a few databases out there I've seen that have tried to put together a sheet like this, and their shots gained metrics don't even add up, right? They're not neutralized out there to 0. You have players that are clearly gaining too many strokes to the field. Like I saw a database that had Jon Rahm gaining like 3 strokes off the tee per round. Like, you got to be reasonable about it. And these were published by the LIV Tour. They work with a company called Champion Data that puts together all of their shots gained metrics. And this is the last report that we got. So that's what I'm working with. Again, missing the 3 rounds from LIV Miami, but it should give you a really good idea of how these players are going at it. This is posted on my Patreon page, by the way, so if you want access to this spreadsheet, the only way to get it is to be a part of my Patreon page. No matter what tier you're a part of there, if you have anything golf related, you will get access to this. So that includes the prop tier too, right? So if you're a prop only guy, you'll also get this for this week, but something that I did extra out there for my Patreons because of the fact that it's not a really big PGA Tour week, right? Not a lot of people are looking at that. So you've got the shots gained metrics for all the players on there. The stuff I have blacked out over here, we have our adjusted shots gained. So this is my course model for this week. So essentially taking a player's shots gained and molding them towards this golf course. The rank is where they rank in the field when it comes to adjusted shots gained. So you can see Joaquin Niemann, who we're going to talk about here in a second, is number 1 in the field there. Course history is history at this golf course. So if they played here last year, what did they end up doing? Projected points is for Draftkings. That's for DFS purposes. Ownership would be their DFS ownership. So their average ownership across all the contests out there. And pull over here is going to be whether I'm playing them or not. So just making sure that we're all on the same page of what to expect from the spreadsheet. And obviously the modeling is going to be really helpful. Again, I'm favoring it towards the guys that are better from fairway in. And then this course history, which you can find anywhere, right? It's nice to have in the same spot. And that combined with the shots gained metrics gives us a ton of data to work with this week. So now that we've got that out of the way, right, let's talk about our plays. So Joaquin Niemann's not somebody I'm betting outright. The outright numbers are just pretty trash on him, especially where I have access over there in Hard Rock Bet. But at 11 grand, I'll play him in DFS. He's been the best player in LIV Golf this year, and that is non-exaggeration. In terms of shots gained, is by far the best player over here on this side. Jon Rahm, after the LIV Miami event, has slightly caught up to Joaquin Niemann, but Niemann is still number 1 pretty much all the ball striking categories, right? Gaining nearly a stroke per round off the tee, second to only a Jon Rahm there, and gaining by far the most strokes on approach. And LIV Golf actually breaks down their approach profile based on distance from the hole, and in every single category, he's top 5, right? So whether it's the sub 100 shots, it's the mid-tier, it's the longer irons that you're looking at, Joaquin Niemann has been an absolute striper. So everyone's known that. That's why he was relatively popular for the Masters, right, when he was playing there under the special invite. But at a golf course like this where it's a little bit less off the tee heavy, that's why I'm not taking him at a short number for an outright. He's still doing what I'm looking for with the approach play. He's been the number 1 Draftkings scorer over there on the LIV Tour this year, and I want to buy into that. So he's my number 1 course fit. I'm playing him. He only finished in 30th here last year, which isn't great, but now he's in better form, right? He's on another level of golf, in my opinion. And at 20% ownership, I do think he's going to get some attention this week. But because you have guys like Jon Rahm there, Bryson, even Terrell Hatton, that I think will get ownership this week, I don't think it's going to get too out of hand. So when you have that kind of form, when you're by far the best player on a tour, if I can get you at sub 25% ownership, right, whether it's PGA, LIV, you name it, right, I'm going to take that shot on a player. So I'll be playing quite a bit of Joaquin Niemann this week. He is 11 grand, so comes with a hefty price tag, but with a lot of guys down there in the bottom 7s, even the top end of the 6K range that I like, it's going to be something that I'm able to fit into lineups. So again, not an outright bet that I'm taking, but at least somebody I wanted to point out from the DFS perspective. especially because he's been the best player on the LIV Tour, right? 1.6 shots gained approach per round is literally next level stuff. Next up, we got Cam Smith, which is our first outright that we're taking. So all of these plays are going to be guys I'm taking in DFS, but the outrights, the placement bets, I'll make sure to point those out as well. And for Cam Smith, I got him at 10-1 to win this golf tournament. So last year finished tied for third, made a run out there on Sunday towards Taylor Gooch. Gooch, though, was minus 20 through 2 rounds. He was not going to get caught right out there on Sunday, so he never really had a chance to win this event. He's $9,900, which I think is more than fair. And where he really gets an advantage this week, right, is from fairway in, right? If you exclude the off the tee play, which it's still going to factor in this week, right? It's not like we can completely ignore it, but the categories that we're emphasizing are the ones where Cameron Smith really separates himself, right? Gaining a bunch with the putter, gaining a bunch around the green. The irons, though on the LIV Tour, have just been a slight positive. He was much better at the LIV Miami event. I can tell you that before he withdrew out there on the first day, he actually looked pretty decent. But more importantly, at the Masters, he was extremely solid with the irons. In fact, like all 4 rounds gained significantly to the field, was one of the better iron players in all of that major championship field, and surprisingly wasn't as strong with the short game, right? Was pretty average out there with the around the green and the putting. So if he can continue that iron play and get back to that short game that is just absolutely magical, maybe the best short game player that we have in the entire world, you're looking at a potential win for him. So the irons last year were the problem for Cam Smith. He was a little bit out of sorts when it came to his LIV Adelaide, yet still was able to turn that into a T3 finish. And at $9,900, he's a lot cheaper than Joaquin Niemann. There's another guy up there in the 10K range I'm playing too. It's John Rahm. I'll just say it right up there at 11.9. But if you start with the Cam Smith, you don't have to be as aggressive with your salary, right? You're saving a lot of that up top. You're able to go from maybe a 6K player up to a mid-7s for your last man in. And he fits the golf course. He's that hometown kid, of course, right? He's Australian, right? He's playing at his home country event. Going to be a lot of pressure involved with that, but he handled that quite well last year, right? And he also won his hometown event in the U.S., right? Over there at TPC Sawgrass, winning the Players Championship. So obviously those narratives just a little bit silly. I like to throw it out there for entertainment purposes. But we'll have to see how he does over there on the Australian soil. So like him at the outright, at 20% ownership, I think that's reasonable at $9,900. Next up, they've got Brooks Koepka, who I'm playing in DFS. That's where more of my exposure is going to come in. I also took him for a top 10 at plus 190, as my projections have him at about a like 35 to maybe 40% top 10 rate. So they've got him at a pretty good chance of finishing top 10. He's plus 190, which is essentially implying around like 33 to 35% top 10. So I have him slightly better than that. And obviously a lot of these books use their, juice. They try and take their tax out of there. So there's probably even a little bit more value compared to the actual odds. And at $9,200, that is extremely cheap for Brooks. I mean, he's cheaper than Answer. He's cheaper than Burmester. I understand him being cheaper than Gooch, right? Who won here last year. Gooch has been an absolute animal out there in the LIV Tour, but Oosthuizen, he's cheaper than that. He's cheaper than Terrell Hatton, which I think is a mistake. And obviously at the Masters did not have his best stuff, but in terms of shots gained tee to green is one of the best players in the field and is using a new putter. So hopefully he's had a few more weeks to get this thing figured out, because that's been the only thing holding him back here in 2024. Everything else has been there. You can see the approach play has been over 3/4 of a stroke per round, solid around the green. And if he turns that putter into a positive, he's just a win waiting to happen. So I like the floor with him. That's why I'm taking him for a top 10 at plus 190. But even at 20% ownership, like I know 20% doesn't look great. And these ownership projections, by the way, are just my best guess at it, because it's a tough week for them, right? There's no content out there. It's going to be tough to really see where everyone's putting their chips. But if he is around that 20% mark, at $9,200, that's a bargain, right? He's a number 11 in pricing, despite being number 7 in my modeling. He's a major champion. He's one of the guys who's won 3-4 times over there on the LIV Tour, and there's a lot of other players that don't even have their first LIV Tour win at this point. So I love him at $9,200. I think at DFS, he's going to get attention because the price tag is too low, but from the betting market, that he's being a little bit disrespected. Next up, we've got Paul Casey, who's been arguably the best player not named Joaquin Niemann out there on the LIV Tour. He's been in contention week in, week out. So I'll back him at 25-1 to win. I think it's going to come at some point here in 2024. And the main reason for that, the approach play, right? Gaining 1.4 strokes per round has been really solid from tee to green. The putter hasn't been the best, but I'll take a shot on that at 8,600, right? One of the best tee to green players in all of this tour. He's also a player that, didn't play well here last year, so hopefully that keeps the ownership lower. And a lot of people that aren't paying attention to LIV, that are maybe only playing it this week, right? You're going to see an $8,600 Paul Casey. They're going to see a 39th last year and go, I could never play this guy, right? Except if you take a look at his finishes, it's been like top 10 after top 10. He's had a runner-up finish, a few top 5, top 10 finishes over his last 4 starts. If you take a look at the advanced metrics, right, you take a look at the shots gained, this tee to green play, this ball striking in particular, right, where he's gaining about a entire 2 strokes per round right there, is stuff that you're not going to find with other players in the 8K range. In fact, if you take a look at a lot of the 8K players that are actually losing on approach, I think a Matthew Wolff, a Leishman, a Patrick Reed, and Adrian Meronk are all players that are losing in that category, whereas you can get an elite tier iron player at about the same kind of ownership as some of the other players. And while I have him there at like 20%, right, Paul Casey about 20, maybe 25% ownership, that's me giving a lot of credit to people, right? Hoping that they're going out there looking at the recent form, perhaps even taking a look at the shots gained metrics like I am here. But if people aren't buying into all that, I could see them being lower owned. I could see them being like 10 to 15% if people aren't doing all of their due diligence. So that's what I mean about like ownership being tough this week, right? For PGA, like we know the kind of research that most of your casuals are going to put in, but for LIV Golf, that's a much bigger unknown. So this is my first time really going out there and putting projections out there. So I'm not expecting them to be perfect by any means. I guess just a little bit of a disclaimer there, right? My algorithm has to get tuned up, right, for each sport that we're doing it for, right? Like my NFL ownership algorithm is much different than my PGA, which is much different than what I have for my LIV Golf ownership here. So we're doing our best. Hopefully he is low owned. If he's like 30, 40%, he's going to be real chalky, but might have to eat that, right? He's my number 2 modeling ranked play this week, right? His shots gained, adjusted shots gained is through the roof, and a player that I can't avoid, especially out there for the outright at 25-1. And now let's go through our long shots. So we're going to have, 5 7K plays here that have all bet outright. So I'll just group them together here. It's Richard Bland, Jason Kokrak, who I both got at 50-1. I got Sebastian Munoz at 75-1 and Kevin Na at 60. I'm going to leave Mito out of this because he's a little bit of a different talking point, so we'll talk about him later. But these 4 up here all fit the same description. They're all playing much better than what people would expect. They're all long shots from the outright perspective, but they model much better than they would for other golf courses. So for example, Richard Bland, number 14 in my modeling, despite being number 23 in pricing. Jason Kokrak, right, number 24 in my model. That's pretty respectable for him. We'll talk about him more in a second as well. Munoz, number 11 in my model. Kevin Na, right, number 18 in my model, despite being number 30th in the pricing. They're all players that get a significant boost, right, because of the course setup here. And guys like Richard Bland, right, not known for being long off the tee. Same thing about guys like a Kevin Na, right? If anything, their deficiency is off the tee. Now, you can see Bland, right, slightly losing there. Kevin Na's actually gaining off the tee. That is because of how accurate that he's been. But the ball striking's been there for both players. You can see gaining in both the approach play and around the green. Over here with Richard Bland, even more significantly with the approach play and around the green, is gaining a bunch of strokes. So they fit Grange perfectly, right? They're the sort of players that are going to get an advantage at this sort of track. And Jason Kokrak, I'll remind you, right, his last tour win on the PGA Tour was at Colonial, which is kind of like this, right? Colonial is a course where you don't have to be super long off the tee. It's about being precise. They've got those tight driving corridors. There can be some scoring out there. Jason Kokrak has won at that sort of golf course, and he's gaining a half a stroke per round with the approach play. So that's what I like there. And then Munoz has been a little hit or miss. He's been really good with the putter this year, but he's had some top-end performances. But what I really like about him is that he scores at golf courses where there's a lot of eagles, right? Like, he's an extremely aggressive player. Sebastian Munoz used to be the absolute nuts play when it came to showdown for PGA DFS. He's a player that would usually go out there, either make like 7-8 birdies or more, or go out there and only make 1 or 2. So he's got an extremely wide range of outcomes. But this golf course where you have all those holeouts, where you have drivable par 4s, par 5s that you can go for 2, is tailor-made for that sort of player. So at 75-1, I'll take the shot on him, but another player that models really well for this golf course. But the last one we'll talk about is Mito. Mito, if you look at the metrics, has been horrible. This is a complete just talent level play right out there with Meo Pereira. Again, I'm at 75-1, so that's quite the number out there in a 54 player field. He's $7,100, and in DFS, I don't think is going to carry much ownership. You can see guys like Kokrak, right, I have relatively low owned. Bland at like 12.5, not 12.5, maybe 15% on Sebastian Munoz. All relatively low owned, but Mito might even be single digit owned when it comes down to it out there in lock. The reason for that is he's been horrible, right? He's losing a ton of strokes with the putter. Now, the off the tee has actually been a negative as well, which is a surprise for somebody of his skill set off the tee, extremely long normally. But gaining on approach, is the one piece of hope that we have for Meo Pereira. And then the other part of it is that he's a near major champion, right? Nearly won the PGA Championship. He's a player that before he left for the LIV Tour, people were looking at as a future superstar out there. In fact, if you look at 2023, he had a much better season, right? So 2024 has not been as kind to Meo Pereira, but knowing long-term that he's a much better player than the price tag, if he was in form, he'd probably be like 30-1 to win this golf tournament, is a shot that I'll take. So I like it more for DFS, right? I took just a small little quarter unit bet, right, out there for the outright perspective, but in DFS, when he's potentially going to be single-digit owned, just brings a ton of upside to the table. So it's a real ugly play, especially if you look at the putting. I mean, it has been horrible, right? Losing 1.21 strokes per round. But if you can overlook that, just kind of look at the upside long term, you can probably see why I'm getting some exposure there. So he's definitely going to be a leverage play that I'm taking, right? If I'm taking some 20% owned guys up top, right, even my 7K plays are going to be like 10 to 12%. I'm going to have to get different at some point. And I think Meo is going to be a way that we can do that. Then the last play that we're taking is Phil Mickelson, and he's one of the super cheap plays that I'm comfortable getting to here, and part of it's the fact that he finished in T11 last year. He was actually in contention there on Sunday for a little bit before having a stumble on his last few holes. He's not had the best 2024, but at least did look respectable out there at the Masters. But what I really like about Phil is you take him at courses where off the tee is not the end-all be-all, right? Now, the approach stats don't look great this year. Even the putting doesn't look great this year. But if there's a part of his game that he still has at his age, it's from fairway in, right? It's hitting some irons. We know the short game is always going to be there. He can get hot with the flat stick. We've seen that at a few events over the last year or so. So if you need to save some salary, right, I'd say he's not the worst choice. I mean, even Pat Perez with his T3 finish is probably not the worst choice either. Charles Schwartzel's not playing that well, but he also had a good finish here last year. Those are the kind of guys that I'd be considering out there in the 6K range. So hopefully this gives you a better idea of how to research for this given week. Again, if you want access to this spreadsheet with everything uncensored, that includes all my projections for DraftKings, my player pool, my ownership to use to go out there and make all of your game theory decisions, check out the Patreon page in the link of the description of this video. There's a link down there. So got it all on there. I'm going to be updating this once more before lock. Lock, by the way, guys, is Thursday night at 9:45. So because they're playing in Australia, right, they're quite a far ahead of us in terms of our time. So they're going to be teeing off in the middle of the night for pretty much all the U.S., right, especially for us over here on the East Coast of the United States. So make sure you get those lineups in. I'll be putting out that one more update before lock and taking these sort of players from my outright card. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got for the DFS and betting preview. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead and smash that like button for me, and best of luck with all of your lineups and outrights for this week. I'll be doing a live stream for rounds 2 and 3 out there for LIV. That'll be a part of what I'm doing for my PGA content, so keep an eye out for that. Our live streams are going to be covering both slates out there for the single round slate and over there from the prop side as well. So if you're wondering about props, make sure to check it out there. I'll be posting a lot over there for LIV, and if we do get props over there for the Zurich side, I'll be making sure to cover that as well. So make sure to check it out. Subscribe if you haven't already so you can get notified when I'm going live for all of that. And best of luck out there with all of your exposure, whether you're playing DFS, whether you're playing outrights. We got 2 events going on this week, and even if you're not a big fan of the PGA stuff, at least we have a somewhat normal event over there for the LIV Golf side. So I'm looking forward to it. More golf is always better for me. I always like having more events to watch. So we got DP World Tour this week, LIV Tour, and the PGA Tour. Let's go out there and make it a good one. Appreciate the support here on the channel as usual. Give me your winner down there in the chat. And if you can go out there and get the winner for this week, you'll go ahead and win a free month of my Patreon page. So give me your best guess down below if you want access to those spreadsheets. Well, you can go down there, join it yourself. Again, link is down in the description, or you can go out there and earn it via getting the winner. So let me know down below. Smash that like button if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys for the content throughout the weekend.